In 1995, £75,000 a year was not a salary, it was a punchline. It was the number your uncle mentioned at Christmas to explain why the neighbours had suddenly built a conservatory. Adjusted for inflation, that figure would be worth roughly £162,000 in today's money. It bought a detached house in the home counties, a company car that turned heads, private school fees if you were disciplined, and a fortnight in the sun without once checking your balance. In 2026, £75,000 buys you a grown adult standing in the chilled aisle at Waitrose, holding a box of 6 free-range eggs, doing arithmetic he never imagined he would have to do. So what happened? How did a salary that once marked you out as comfortably elite quietly become the new definition of just about coping? The answer is not that you got poorer. The answer is that the machinery around you changed shape while your payslip stood still. Start with a trap almost nobody talks about at dinner parties, because it is invisible on paper. It is called fiscal drag, and it is the most effective tax rise in modern British history precisely because it was never announced as one. The personal allowance has been frozen at £12,570 since 2021. The higher rate threshold has been frozen at £50,270 since 2022. And in the most recent budget, that freeze was extended again, now running all the way to April 2031. Here is why that matters. If the higher rate threshold had simply been uprated with inflation since the freeze began, it would sit at around £63,700 today. Instead, it sits at £50,270. That gap means roughly £13,000 of your income is being taxed at 40% that would previously have been taxed at 20%. That is around £2,680 a year taken from you without a single headline, without a single vote, without a single minister ever standing up and saying the words, "We are raising your taxes." Every pay rise you have fought for since 2021 has been walking straight into the HMRC shears. So let us run the actual arithmetic for the 2026 to 2027 tax year, because this is where the illusion collapses. £75,000 gross. Income tax comes to £17,432. National insurance, at 8% on the middle band and 2% above the upper earnings limit, takes another £3,511. And if you went to university between 2012 and 2023, you are on a Plan 2 student loan, which takes 9% of everything above £29,385. That is another £4,105. Total deductions, just over £25,000. Your £75,000 salary lands as £49,952. That is £4,162 a month. Not poverty, but not the number in your head when you accepted the job. Now comes the part that quietly devours what is left. Call it the entry fee. Before you have answered a single email, you have to physically arrive at the high-paying job. An annual season ticket from Reading into London, Paddington costs £5,856. Add a Zones 1 to 2 annual travel card at £1,788, and you are at £7,644 a year, purely to be in the building. That is more than 15% of your entire net pay. 15 pence in every pound you actually take home, spent on the privilege of earning the rest of it. Drive instead, and you swap the season ticket for petrol, the congestion charge, station parking, and an insurance premium that has climbed relentlessly. The number barely moves. The high salary and the high cost of accessing it are welded together. Then, if you have children, you meet the cliff. The high-income child benefit charge begins the moment the higher earner's adjusted net income passes £60,000. For every £200 above that line, 1% of your child benefit is clawed back. At £80,000, it is all gone. At £75,000, you are £15,000 into that taper. A family with 2 children receives £2,337 a year in child benefit. 75% of it is taken back. You keep about £580 of it, but look at the marginal rate, because this is the number that should make you sit up. On your next pound earned, 40% income tax, 2% national insurance, 9% student loan, and the child benefit clawback on top. Combined, you are handing over almost 63 pence of every additional pound. A family on £75,000 faces a higher marginal rate than a family on £150,000. That is not a conspiracy. It is simply what happens when three separate withdrawal mechanisms are stacked on top of one another by three different governments who never checked each other's homework. And this is where the psychology shifts, in a way that is almost too subtle to notice until it has already happened. The person earning £75,000 in 2026 has the grocery habits of someone who earned £20,000 a decade ago. They know which evening the yellow stickers go on. They do the Waitrose shop for the things that matter and the Aldi shop for everything else. And they have stopped feeling embarrassed about it. They price match olive oil. They notice when the pack size shrinks but the price does not. Food prices in Britain have risen by roughly a third since 2019. Your brain still holds the old prices. Every trolley is a small, quiet argument between the salary you think you earn and the receipt in your hand. You feel it most clearly on any random morning in the 90 seconds after the direct debits clear. Mortgage, nursery, council tax, season ticket loan, car finance, energy, insurance. The balance drops and you look at what is left and you understand something uncomfortable. You are not wealthy. You are a pass-through account. Money enters in your name and leaves in somebody else's. The landlords, the nurseries, the lenders. You are simply the bit of plumbing it travels through. Which brings us to the anchor holding all of this down. In 2021, a 5-year fixed mortgage could be had for 1.5%. Today, the average 5-year fix sits at around 5.5%, with the Bank of England base rate at 3.75%. The average house in the southeast now costs £376,819. Put down 10%, and you are borrowing around £340,000 over 25 years. At 1.5%, that costs £1,360 a month. At 5.5%, it costs a little under £2,100. The difference is £728 every single month, nearly £8,700 a year. That money has not been spent. It has not bought you a holiday, a kitchen, or a single share. It has evaporated into interest. It is the exact sum that used to be the difference between surviving and building. And now consider what that £728 a month could have done instead. Invested into a SIP or a stocks and shares ISA at a long-run return of 7% over 20 years, that same monthly amount compounds to just over £380,000. £380,000. That is not a rounding error. That is the difference between retiring at 57 and retiring at 67. That is the entire gap between the generation that bought before 2021 and the generation that did not. Same job, same effort. Same £75,000 on the P60. Completely different lives, decided almost entirely by the interest rate on the day you signed. So here is the conclusion, and it is not a comfortable one. Wealth in Britain is no longer defined by the top line of your P60. That number is a vanity metric now. It tells you what you generate, not what you keep. And the gap between those two things has never been wider. What actually defines your position is two things. The first is your social wage, the value of what you receive without paying market rates for it. Employer pension contributions, subsidised childcare, flexible working that lets you live somewhere cheaper, a season ticket loan. These are worth more than a pay rise because they are not taxed at 63% on the margin. The second is asset resilience, not income, ownership. The mortgage that is smaller than your neighbour's, the ISA that has been quietly compounding for 11 years, the SIP you have been feeding since your 20s. Because the real trap is not that £75,000 is not enough. It is that chasing £85,000 will not fix it either. Each additional pound arrives smaller than the last, while the cost of the life required to earn it keeps rising to meet it. True freedom in 2026 is not a higher number. It is a shorter list of things you are obliged to pay for. Stop optimizing the top line. Start dismantling the dependency. If you learned something, make sure to like and hit subscribe. See you in the next one.